Hey there and welcome back. Today I'm going to show you how you can migrate your data from an existing WordPress project to Payload. This will be the first episode of 2 in total. In the next video we are going to take care of rebuilding the front end with the data that we're going to migrate today. Now, why would you even want to switch to Payload? Payload is fully open source. It's written 100% in TypeScript, not in PHP. And it is completely configurable through code, which means that you don't have to click everything together, but you can basically configure everything within your code editor, which makes setup and extending the system a lot faster. Also, compared to WordPress, it basically runs on a toaster. It is really resource saving. You can basically rent a very cheap VPS for $4 or something, and it will run completely fine for most applications, even e-commerce. And it also gives you a lot more flexibility. It's headless, so you can choose your own front-end framework that you want to work with. Payload version 3 is now a native Next.js app, so it's super easy to integrate it with Next.js, but you're free to choose Vue, Astro, whatever you want. Also, it has support for a lot more features, which means you can choose your own file storage. You can choose your own database. You can have multiple collections that can authenticate with Payload. You can have multiple collections where you can upload files. So it's a lot less restrictive than in WordPress. And last but not least, you can basically build anything with it because it provides you with functionality like hooks or custom endpoints that enable you to extend Payload to behave more like a backend framework, more than just a standard CMS. There's just one thing that you need to keep in mind. You will need to know how to code, or you will need a developer. That's just because Payload is not a no-code or low-code tool, but is configured through code, which will in return, however, give you a lot more flexibility, like I just said, and therefore competitive advantage over nearly every system that has been built in WordPress. Regarding our project structure for the project that we're going to migrate today, in WordPress, you might be familiar with pages and posts, which have a similar structure. They basically both include those Gutenberg layout blocks. What we're going to do is we're going to migrate them into 2 separate collections, so the pages collection and post collection. In Payload, things are very simple. You basically have collections, which is a collection of similar structured data, for example, pages or blog posts or users. And you also have globals, which is basically like collections, but you can only create one single document in them. For the post authors, we're going to do the same thing. We're actually going to use the normal users collection that have access to the Payload backend, but you could also split it up and create a separate collection, blog authors. Same thing for the post categories. We're going to create a post categories collection. For the Gutenberg blocks, there is a very similar thing in Payload as well, which is called blocks. So we can basically create simple layout blocks that we can stack together in a layout for every page or for every blog post. For the media, we're going to create a media collection, which has uploads enabled. Like I said, the difference to WordPress is we could, in theory, split the media up into images, videos, and documents and have 3 separate collections that all contain uploaded documents. And in regards to the menus, what we're going to do, we're going to create 2 globals, so a header global and a footer global for our header and footer. And in there, we're going to add those navigation menus. You could also create a separate collection for menus that would keep it similar to how WordPress does it. Just for the sake of simplicity, we're going to keep it simple and put it directly in the header and footer. As I just mentioned, pages and posts in WordPress both consist of those Gutenberg blocks. And we're going to do a similar thing in Payload. And for every Gutenberg block, we will have to create a schema which defines what fields this block actually has. So for example, for the hero block, We can say it has a field heading and a field subheading. But we'll also need a server component and a client component for the Next.js front-end part. Like I said, the difference to WordPress is that Payload in and of itself is a headless CMS, so it provides the data, but you have to build the front-end blocks yourself. The front-end part will be handled in the next video. So in this one, we're just going to focus on creating the schemas for the blocks. So there will be 3 simple blocks in our WordPress project: a cover block, a paragraph block, and an image block. And for them, we're going to create similar blocks in Payload. The paragraph block is basically a rich text block, which we're going to talk about later as well. In addition to that, we will have one extra block that shows the latest blog articles. So in WordPress, we will have one automatic page that just shows our recent blog articles. What we do instead of that in Payload is create one of those blocks that automatically fetches all recent blog articles. And then we can put that block wherever we want. We don't have to put it on this special page. We can put it on the home page. We can put it wherever in the data privacy section. And in addition to that, we will have the header block and the footer block, which will live globally on the entire page. There's one recommendation I wanted to give you, and I would actually recommend you to migrate the standard pages, like the home page or the About Us page, manually, because this will give you the opportunity to restructure and clean up your project, and don't just, take everything over from the WordPress project and keep the old structure, which might not even make a lot of sense in Payload. So I will show you a way how to automatically migrate, for example, blog posts. And since blog posts is the same structure as pages, you could do that for the pages as well. However, the majority of a site is often, the automatically generated pages from, for example, your 1,000 blog articles or your 1,000 WooCommerce products or something. So as long as you migrate those automatically, you will save yourself 90% of the effort. And I think the rest, so the 10%, is worth doing manually. I will now show you the current WordPress project. We are afterwards going to set up the Payload project, add the collections and globals. We'll create the blocks in Payload. We're going to then migrate all of our media from WordPress to Payload automatically. Using that media, we're also going to manually migrate just the 2 pages that we have on there. And afterwards, we're going to automatically migrate all remaining blog posts. And we also have the Advanced Custom Fields plugin added to the blog posts. And I'm going to show you how you can migrate them as well. So here's our WordPress project. That's our homepage. It's a very simple cover block and just an image block. We also have a /blog page. This is currently the page that automatically displays all the recent blog posts that I just talked about. And if we click on one of those blog posts, as you can see, the blog posts are structured similarly. They have, this heading, and then they have their content as basically a rich text or a paragraph, and they also have an image block. They also have this function to leave a reply. We are not going to implement this in this video because it would just take too long. But if you're interested in learning how to implement a common function, just please let us know in the comment below. To set up our new Payload project, all that we have to do is open up our terminal, go to the folder where we want to add our project, and call npx create payload app at beta. If you're watching this a bit later, you might not have to add the beta flag, but it's currently version 3 is still in beta, so we have to add it. Now, this will ask me to install the package, and it will ask me for a project name. I'm going to call it WordPress or WP migration. I'm going to choose a blank project template. I'm going to select the MongoDB database. And for now, I'm just going to select a local database string, but you could obviously also throw in a remote string for MongoDB Atlas, for example. So this will now install all dependencies. And as soon as that is done, we can cd into our folder and open up VS Code in there. If we now do npm run dev, it should already be able to start our development server. And if we access localhost 3000/admin, this is important because we currently don't have a home page. After it has loaded, we will be asked to create our first user, which I'm going to do real quick. And now we have our admin panel. So let's get started by creating the pages collection. In source collections, I'm going to create pages.ts, say export const pages, which is a collection config. I'm going to give it a slug, pages, and fields. You can specify a lot more here, but I'm going to keep it simple. For the fields, I'm going to paste in a name field, a slug field, which means, homepage / whatever. And I'm also going to create a layout field, which is of type blocks, that we're going to fill with our blocks afterwards. Next up, I'm going to create blog posts. So blog posts.ts, which have the same structure as our pages. So I'm going to say blog posts, which is a collection config. Give it a slug blog posts. I'm using camel case here. You can name your slugs however you want. You can do it with a dash as well. Fields. Going to have the same fields. And then we are going to create the blog categories, which is basically the categories of our blog posts. Export const blog categories, which is also a collection config that I just have to import later. Blog categories. And those will only have a name field for now. Type text. And it's required. All right. Before we can continue, we need to add them to our payload config, which I'm going to do under collections. I'm going to add them into this array, pages, blog posts. If it gives me the auto import, and blog categories. For some reason it doesn't want to import them automatically, so I just use the autocomplete. And if we go back to our admin panel, it should automatically refresh and show us our new collections in a couple of seconds. Okay, so here we are with pages, blog posts, and blog categories. One thing that we missed is giving our blog posts an author. So what I'm going to do in this case, I'm going to go back to blog posts, and at the bottom, I'm going to add another field called name author, which is type relationship. And that way we can link multiple documents together. So I'm going to say relation to users, and I can also give it a label, author, and I'm going to make it required because every blog post should have an author. After we've successfully created all of our collections, we're now going to continue with the blocks. So in the source folder, I'm going to create a new folder called blocks. You can, in theory, put them wherever you want. I just like to put them in their own subdirectories for less chaos. I'm going to start with the cover block. So I'm going to create another folder, cover. And in that, I'm going to create a schema. Again, the name doesn't matter. Export const cover, and this is type block. I'm also going to give it a slug for cover. Fields. It will have a heading, which will be type rich text. And it will also be required. We could also give it another name, subheading, if we want to. It won't have a background image, and the subheading will be just normal text for now. To continue, I'm going to paste in the other blocks. So we have 3 other blocks in total. The image block, which is a simple schema as well. We basically just have one field, an image, which is type upload. This is similar to a relationship field, but you can actually upload a new media element within that field. But it also links to the media collection where we have uploads enabled. Then we have our rich text block, which is very simple as well. We just have our content field, which is rich text. And then we have the recent blog articles, which actually doesn't have any fields at all, because by default, we just wanted to fetch all the recent blog articles. What you could add here, for example, is a special field that just specifies what articles this component should exactly show. So for example, shown posts, which would be type relationship, and it would be a relation to the blog post, and it would have a has many set to true because we want to specify multiple posts. But we're not going to do that for now, so I'm going to get rid of it. To add our newly created blocks to pages and our blog posts, we're going to back to pages.ts, and under layout blocks, we're going to add cover. So since the autocomplete doesn't seem to work properly today, I'm just going to import it manually. So I'm going to import the cover schema, the recent, I think I call it recent blog articles. It should be recent blog posts to make it more clear. Posts and recent blog posts. So going back, recent blog posts. I also want the rich text block and the image block that I just have to import now, but that should work. I'm now going to copy and paste them over into our blog post collection because they have the exact same structure. And now if we go back to our admin panel, go to pages and create a new page. If we click on add layout, we should now see our blocks added to this layout field here. Let's continue migrating all of our media from WordPress to Payload. If we go into our WordPress dashboard to media, you can see we have quite some pictures here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to export this as a XML file. So under Tools, Export, I'm going to choose Media. I'm going to download the export file. I'm going to save it on my desktop. This is the XML that we're looking for. Now, what I will do is I will just copy and paste it into our project. I'm going to rename it and just call it media.xml. And if I paste it in our project, it should appear right at the top. To migrate the media, we're going to use a custom script that accesses the local payload API and creates media elements for us. What the XML file contains is links to our resources in WordPress. So it's very important that your site is still online and reachable so that we can just fetch the data from there and upload it in Payload. I'm going to paste 2 scripts here. I just created them in JS. You could obviously just create them in TypeScript as well. You will need a migration wrapper and a media migration. This is because we have to import this migration script itself without client files. We get a helper from Payload here, but that's just why we need this separate file. In our actual migration, what we're going to do is we're going to import Payload so that we get this payload object. We're then using the XML parser from a library fast XML parser to just parse the XML. Then we're going to map through the media items contained in there. So as you can see, the data.rss channel item, if we look that up here, we will have, that's the data, RSS channel. And then under items, we basically, or under item, we will get an array that will just have every post in there. And then what we're going to do with this array, the GUID is the actual URL that contains the media here. So this one. And we're going to take this, we're going to download it, transform it into a buffer that we can then upload to Payload. This should also work if you just specify file path here and just set it to the GUID, so that will fetch the resource directly. I just wanted to show you how you can actually download this, turn it into a buffer and upload it if you want to manipulate in some way or if you have other use cases. So this will just map through it. It's fairly simple. This is not a hyper efficient migration tool that will be the fastest one. It's just the easiest one to read. And in our case, even if you have, I don't know, 1,000 images or something, this should work fine. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to call the migration wrapper by calling node migration wrapper. And let's see how it goes. So it will say, yeah, cannot find package fast XML parser. This is just because I forgot to install the required dependencies. We will need, first of all, the fast XML parser. We're also going to need a package called meme or mime, which just is for the file type so that we can recognize it. That should be it. As soon as that is installed, we can rerun our script. So now it's starting the migration. As you can see, it's going through all of those images here. It's skipping one of them. So if the response is not okay, so if the media file is corrupt or doesn't exist in a WordPress project, it will just skip it and lock it to the console. Obviously, you might want to throw an error if it doesn't work, or you might just want to skip it and re-add some of the missing ones later by hand. But let's go to our admin panel and see if it's there. Obviously, yeah, we have to restart our development server. And as you can see, it's still loading the resources here, but it seems to have migrated all of the images successfully. Let's just open one up in a new tab, or maybe another one as well. All right, so it seems to show all images. They appear here. So we successfully migrated our media. We can now move on to creating our pages in Payload. In our project in WordPress, we just have two pages. One is the home page. As I said, it's basically contains the cover block and one image block. And then we also have our blog page, which is this automatic post page that shows all recent blog articles, which we're going to recreate in Payload as well. To do that, I'm going to create a new page. So I'm going to pages. Sometimes it might take a second to recompile some things here. All right, create a new page. I'm going to call it home. I'm going to give it the slug index. So for the homepage, the slug in theory is undefined or an empty string. What I'm doing here is I'm giving it the index slug, and later on I'm going to replace the index slug with basically an empty string. For the layout, I'm going to add the cover block. So I'm just going into my WordPress project here and copying this HTML, because the rich text editor actually just supports pasting in HTML. This looks pretty neat already. For the subheading, I made it required. Let's not make it required. So let's go back to our blocks cover and remove the required flag, because I actually don't need it. The rich text is enough. And as you can see, it basically updates in real time. So now the subheading is not required anymore. Below that, I'm going to add our image block, and I'm going to choose this image here. since we already uploaded it, it's in our media library. So that's the homepage. And now we're also going to create our blog page. So recent blog posts with the slug blog. And the only layout will be our recent blog posts. That might be better to put it in plural. So if you want to adjust the labels, you can say labels, singular, recent blog posts, and plural, recent blog posts. If you don't specify any labels, it will try to do it automatically, but in this case, it doesn't make sense. So I'm just going to manually set the label. As I mentioned, the cool part about that is this recent blog posts block that fetches and displays all the blog posts can be on any page. We can also add it, just to show it to you, at the bottom of our homepage. So I will just put that in for now. And in the second video, when we're going to take care of the front end part, you will see how this will look in the front end. To wrap things up, we're now migrating our blog posts that we have in our WordPress project that you can see here. It's 2 simple blog posts, but we also added the advanced custom fields plugin, which contains a test field that has a what you see is what you get editor. So I'm just going to say, hey, this is a test field h2, and I'm just going to turn this into an h2 and update it. The other one should already have such a custom field in there. Now, as you can see in here in our blog post, we're still empty. If you only have 2 blog posts, do it manually. But in most cases, you will have, 50, 100, maybe even thousands of blog posts. So we will need to migrate them with a migration script as well. This migration will be a bit more complex, but I'm going to walk you through it step by step. So let me first paste in my migration script. I'm just going to call it migration.js. You can probably do a way better job with naming. But before we go through it, there are a few things we need to prepare. First of all, our users need a slug field. So I'm going to say name slug, type text, and I'm going to place it in the sidebar of the admin panel on the right side. What I mean by this is if we go to users and we click on one of the users, we can see on the right side, there's a slug field, 10x WordPress block. I've just pre-filled that in advance. Now, you have to keep in mind it is very important what you put in here. So if we go back to our WordPress installation and go to users, those users are our blog authors in the WordPress project. So as you can see here, we have 10x WordPress block, and the username needs to equal the slug that you put in here. So if you have a lot of users, you might want to create them by hand. Obviously, you can always automatically migrate them with this XML file method that I've shown you. But if you only have a bunch of users, it's faster to just do it by hand. But keep in mind, you have to set the slug. Apart from that, we also need to create a categories field in our blog post. So name categories. Categories will take the plural because it can be multiple. It's a type relationship, relation to block categories, and has many is true because we want to link multiple of them. Also, since we have advanced custom fields enabled on our blog posts, we need to create our test field here. So the only field that we have activated, if we go to blog posts, for example, the second one, you can see we have one test field down below, which is a what you see, what you get editor, and we will transform that into rich text. In Payload, there is no such thing as a advanced custom field plugin. The only thing that you have to do is go to your blog posts collection schema and just add this field. So I'm going to say name, test, field, not fields. It will be type rich text, label test field, and that's it. If you have more custom fields, just add them down below. Okay. What is still missing is we need to get the post categories that we want to have in Payload and actually create them in Payload. So we have knowledge base and news. So let's go to our Payload admin panel. And now we're just going to post categories, create new blog category, and we're calling it news. And we're also going to call one knowledge base. That's it. Now we have two IDs. Let's just take those two IDs for now and copy them into our migration script. I'm going to explain it to you in a second. So in here, I have a category map. Just going to put that in here for the knowledge base. And we have news. All right, we're almost good to go. The only thing left is exporting the blog post from WordPress. So in Tools, Export, I'm going to say Posts. I'm going to download the export file, save it on my desktop. And once again, I'm copying it, putting it into our project here. I had an old WP data. I'm just going to paste this in here, rename it again, wpdata.xml. And now we are ready to import all of our blog posts. So what does the migration script do? First of all, please make sure that you have all the necessary dependencies installed. We need, in addition to the other ones, we need Cheerio. We also need the WordPress parser, and we need a bunch of stuff from Lexical itself, because the Payload rich text editor is actually based on the Lexical rich text editor. And in order to transform that, we need some dependencies here. Also, to parse the HTML and turn it into rich text nodes, we need JS DOM. Now, first thing, getting the payload object again. In addition to that, we're also initializing this headless editor that can transform HTML to rich text for us. This is just a utility function to get the root image URL, because if we have an image in a blog post, the actual URL is the resized image. So WordPress automatically creates resized images, and we want the root image because otherwise we can't match it to the media that we've already imported. So now we're parsing the XML data again. We're mapping through all of the blog posts like we did with the media elements. But in addition to that, we're also parsing the content encoded attribute, again with the WordPress parser, because that will give you an array of blocks down here that you can then go ahead and parse and import into Payload. Now, the more blocks that you have, we only have 3 or 2 blocks for the blog posts in this case. If you have 20 blocks, obviously this will be more effort, because for every single block, you need to write a bit of code to extract the necessary data and import it back to Payload. So for example, if we have our block, our image block here, what we need to do is we need to get the element, get the source attribute, from the source attribute, get the root image URL, get the file name. And what we'll then do is we'll check our media collection for all documents that have this file name. And that's the way that we're going to match our media in Payload with the media that comes from the WordPress blog article. And at the end, we're going to push it to our new layout. Same thing with the paragraph. The only difference is here we're using, again, the headless editor to transform HTML into rich text and put it into this rich text editor. To explain you the stuff that is going on here, here's what we're doing, the mapping for the authors. So that's what I told you by creating this slug. The slug of the author in WordPress is contained in the DC creator attribute, okay? So again, we're just searching our users collection for someone who has this slug, and then we're basically taking the ID, therefore linking the author to the blog post by just putting that in there. The name is the old title. The slug is the old post name. And for the categories, if the category attribute is an array, so if a blog post has multiple categories, it will be an array in WordPress. We're just mapping it, and we're basically mapping the old names to our new ID. And then we're putting this in this relationship field. If it's only one, we just have one element. Now, last but not least, at the bottom, what we're doing here is we're migrating our advanced custom field. This is contained in the WP post meta object, and we're basically just taking it from there, again, running it through the conversion, converting the HTML to rich text and putting the rich text JSON into the test field here. So let's see if our migration script works as expected. You might have noticed I did one small change. I changed the way that we check if it is an array. The other one didn't work, but you will receive the entire migration script somewhere in the description. So let's just call node migration wrapper. That might take a bit of time depending on how many blog posts you have. So let's go back and check out our blog posts. So first blog post, name my first blog post. That seems to work. Slug seems all right. We have our heading, H3. We have our rich text content, another rich text content. As you can see, it's already, it's bold. So the image has been linked successfully. The author, so the only account, which is mine, has been linked, and the categories as well. Now, if you just see an ID for the categories, you might just want to go back into the collection config, say admin, use as title, and we're going to say name. So if we now go back, give it 2 seconds, it should now show the category name instead of the ID, knowledge base. All right, so let's check out the second blog post. Heading 2, slug is all right, normal text. The image has been linked. There's one empty rich text below that. This might happen, but this will not be shown anyways. Author is correct, knowledge base news. And also we have the test field here. So this test field just got migrated successfully as well. This will be it for today's video. In the next one, we're going to take care of actually building a front end in Next.js to use together with our data and payload. If you have any questions, let us know in the comments below. And apart from that, take care and see you in the next video.